problems. My name is Doug Johnson with the nonprofit California Invasive Plant Council, and we work statewide with land managers and volunteers and researchers to stop the spread of invasive plants that impact the state's environment and economy. So this, as Sabrina said, this webinar series is one way of participating in California Invasive Species Action Week. So let me introduce Beatriz Nobua-Behrmann is an ecologist who studies insect-plant interactions. She's originally from Argentina, where she earned her PhD in biology from the University of Buenos Aires. She is the Urban Forestry and Natural Resources Advisor for UC Cooperative Extension, serving Los Angeles and Orange counties. And she focuses on invasive tree pests impacting urban landscapes and the wildlands that surround urban environments. So she is going to talk today about the various invasive species that are damaging California's trees. So welcome, Bea.
Thank you, Doug. All right, I'm going to take over the screen. Is this, can you guys see my?
Yes, we can. Looks good.
Yeah.
There we go.
Fantastic.
All right. So thank you, Doug, for that introduction. Pretty, excuse me. Pretty pleased to be here talking to you guys about the pests that are invasive and that are affecting our California trees. And so sorry. And so today we'll talk about shellhopper, palm weevils, and a few other pests. Just to start with this, we already covered what we consider an invasive species. So again, it's a non-native species, but not everything that's non-native is necessarily invasive. So in order to be invasive, we need it to cause serious economic and environmental harm or even harm to human health. In the case of tree pests, when we talk about the kind of economical damage that they can cause, we can see that they cause great costs, especially to local governments and homeowners. And all those costs are related to managing this pest, which includes the detection and identification of the new invasive pests, the tree removals and replacements due to tree death, treatments that either the governments and the homeowners might do to trees in order to save them from these diseases or these invasive pests, and then managing the infested wood to prevent the spread of the pests. And this is also not even considering other kinds of costs related to the loss of property value due to the loss of trees. And specifically for trees, when we have pests that are affecting them, we have other kinds of impacts that are related to human health and well-being. We all know that trees actually make us happy, and they're very well related to the incidence of heart disease and lung disease in people. Also, by losing trees, we're losing habitat for animals, and particularly important is the loss of habitat for threatened and endangered species. We're also losing ecosystem services related to water retention, air cleaning, the cooling effects of trees in the cities. We also have a lot of safety hazards related to dead branches or dead trees falling on property or people. And also, when we have trees that die because of the pest effects on them, they become available fuel for wildfire. So we know that tree pests especially invasive tree pests, are a big problem. And the reason why invasive pests are particularly problematic is because they don't have any natural enemies in the area that can actually sort of keep them in check. So we have to deal with them ourselves. And also the hosts or the trees are not adapted to these particular pests, and so they cannot defend themselves. So because I'm mostly working here in Southern California, today I would like to cover 3 main invasive tree pests that are affecting the trees here in Southern California. They are the invasive shadow borers, the South American palm weevil, and the gold-spotted oak borer. And for each of these pests, what I would like to do today is to give you an overview of what this pest is about and why is it such a bad pest, basically, but also show you what kind of things you can do as a citizen to either help prevent the spread of this pest or actually help in the management efforts to control and manage these 3 really, really dangerous pests for our trees. So with that, I'll start with one of the main pests that I've been working with, which is the invasive shadow borers. These are teeny tiny beetles. They're roughly the size of a sesame seed. And the most important thing about these beetles is that they have a symbiotic relationship with the fungus. So in here in Southern California, we have 2 species of invasive shadow borers. We have the polyphagous shadow borer and the Kuroshio shadow borer. And each of them is associated with a fungus from the genus Fusarium. And this fungus, either species, what they do is they cause a disease in the trees called Fusarium dieback. So the problem, the way these beetles and their attack on trees work is that when we have a mated female and she finds a host that she likes, she will dig into the trunk or branch of the tree, and inside that she'll make this kind of gallery inside the tree leading towards the cambium or the growing part of the trunk. And in this gallery she will lay her eggs and also grow the Fusarium fungus that she brings with her. And the reason why she does that is because both adults and larvae feed exclusively on this fungus. The problem is that right after that, the beetles will develop inside the tree and then continue with their cycle. But the main problem is this Fusarium fungus causes what we call Fusarium dieback. So to give you an idea of what the Fusarium dieback effect on the tree looks like, here's on the left top picture, we have a cross-section of a branch that was infested, and the arrow here is showing the entrance of a gallery from invasive shadow borer beetle. And all this colored area around the gallery is the area of the tissue of the tree that has been colonized by the Fusarium fungus. What happens is that this fungus causes the vessels of the tree to get clogged. And so what basically happens is that it disrupts the movement of water and nutrients up and down the tree. And that once we have enough hits or enough galleries and fungal infested tissue in the trunk or in a branch, it causes first what we call branch dieback. So part of the tree starts dying. And with time, this eventually causes the death of the whole tree. So one of the things that makes this pest very dangerous is that it can attack a wide range of species of trees. So there's more than 200 species that are actually the shahopper can attack. And of those, 64 are what we call reproductive hosts. So a reproductive host would be a species of tree in which the beetles are successful at growing the fungus and reproducing themselves. So there's 64 species that can make more beetles and then can potentially die because of these disease. Not all the trees are equally susceptible to shahopper and Fusarium dieback. So in here, I'm only showing you the 15 most susceptible species. And as you can see, it includes all the many species of willows, species of oaks, cottonwoods, California sycamore, and London plane. And particularly a very, very susceptible species is the box elder. And I'm going to make an emphasis on box elder, especially for the people that are not in an already infested area, the people that are not from Southern California. The box elders are in Northern California. We have forests of box elders, and they are basically one of the most susceptible and preferred species for these beetles. They can actually kill one box elder in just a matter of a few months. And as you can see also, a lot of these very susceptible species are California natives, which means that this beetle is not only posing a risk or they're not a menace just to the urban forest, which they're very prevalent in the urban forest, but they also have the potential to go into the wilderness forests and do even more damage. If you want to know the full list of 64, here's a website where you can find all the lists of reproductive hosts, and I'll show the website again a little bit later. So the reason why these beetles are invasive is because they're, again, non-native from here. So they are originally from Southeast Asia, and presumably they arrived here to Southern California through wood products or shipping material, which is very common for a lot of borers to actually arrive to new locations. All the invasive borers tend to arrive through shipping material made out of wood. And this is something that is related to the increase on the commerce between at a global scale, right? So we found it first in LA County in 2003, and the biggest problem is that it was mistaken for the tea shahopper, which is another it's another shahopper that actually looks exactly the same. And the only way you can differentiate the tea shahopper from the Polyphagus or Colosio shahopper, which are the ones that we have in here, is through DNA testing. So it's something you would expect, that they basically, the first time they found it, the tea shahopper was a pest that was already known, but was a pest of low concern. So they found it in 2003. They decided it was a tea shahopper, and that was the end of the story for then, until we kept finding a lot of damage in a lot of other trees. And finally in 2012, it was first identified as a different species, as Polyphagus shahopper by Dr. Estlin in Los Angeles. So by 2012, most of the infestation was focused or located in Los Angeles County. The distribution right now of both of these species is covering a bigger range in Southern California, and including up to 6 different counties. So we have in red in here the records of Polyphagus shadowborer, in blue the records of Kuroshio shadowborer. Remember, these two beetles, they look the same and they have pretty much the same effect on trees, and that's why we call them as a group the invasive shadowborers. And so as for the coverage, we can find them in San Diego, Orange County, LA County, Riverside, San Bernardino, Santa Barbara, and there was one record in San Luis Obispo. One of the most interesting things about looking at this map is that the first colonization was the Polyphagus shadowborer, or the red dots. And the second one, the second species, appeared a little bit later in 2014, and that was the Kuroshio shadowborer. And that infestation started in San Diego. A year later, we found the infestation of Kuroshio shadowborer in Santa Barbara. And if you consider that these beetles are teeny tiny, again, the size of a sesame seed, more or less, and they're terrible, terrible flyers, you can realize pretty quickly that a beetle did not fly from San Diego to Santa Barbara on its own. And the main vector of these beetles along Southern California is definitely humans that are moving firewood or untreated green waste around. So again, not only the beetles came to Southern California with humans with packing materials, but they also spread long distance in here in the new introduced area, also by our human activities. Just to give an idea of the kind of impact that these species have and why we are considering them invasive, this is how the Tijuana River Valley in San Diego County looked in May 2015, before the infestation of Kuroshio shadowborer. These are all willow trees. And this is how it looked 9 months later, after the effect of the beetles on the trees. So as you can see, there was a huge loss of trees. About 140,000 willows were lost. And of course, this implies a loss of natural habitat and a big increased risk of fire and flood. The way we can see these beetles or identify the presence of these beetles is by the signs of their presence in the tree. So the main sign is this entry hole that is very perfectly round and roughly the size of the tip of a ballpoint pen. Also, if we scrape away the first layer of the bark, we can still see the perfectly round hole. And this darkened tissue around the hole is the tissue that has been infested by the fungus. And so we can see the effect of both the beetle and the fungus. Other things that we can use to as infestation signs are the presence of staining or frost, like sawdust, or gumming from the tree, or sugary exudate, which is a very common thing in avocados, which are also a reproductive host. But in all these cases, these are signs that means that we should look closer and basically look for that entry hole of the right size. So the main things that we can do to manage this invasive shadowborers are monitoring, either visually inspecting our trees or trapping. And Monitoring is particularly important because finding the infestations at early stages is the best tool, is the best way of actually being able to control the infestation. Those trees that are, there's infested, not ingested. I don't want you guys to ingest tree. The trees that are infested can be treated with combinations of insecticides and fungicides, but also the pruning of infested branches can make a big difference. And once the trees are heavily infested, there's no other choice but to do tree removal to avoid the beetles to move on and colonize the surrounding trees. Heavily infested trees have very low chances of survival anyways. But then also, once you cut down some trees, you need to make sure you manage the infested plant material in an adequate form. And that means either chipping and then solarizing or composting those chips, or solarizing the logs to make sure you're not moving that plant material with beetles from one place to the other. And as for the current efforts, we have current research going on right now on biocontrol related to natural enemies, or using bacteria and fungi as a way to naturally control these beetles. We're also researching more treatment options, and we're developing early detection and rapid response plans for the areas that are not being infected yet. There's a lot going on right now regarding to the management of these pests, and we're putting together a statewide action plan that will help hopefully keep this pest controlled. So what can you do as a regular citizen? Well, the main thing is to learn more about this pest and know how to identify it. So you can go to our webpage, pshb.org, and get a lot more information there. Monitor your trees and check for any signs of the infestation. Don't move firewood around and avoid spreading this pest. And make sure you're disposing green waste responsibly. And that goes together with not moving firewood. As I said, the main way this pest gets spread in here, especially long distances, is by the movement of firewood and green waste. And to avoid getting it, make sure that when you get mulch or some kind of unprocessed plant material, make sure it is from a known source, that you know that the wood or the plant material that mulch was made from is not infested material. Here, so again, to remind you, please visit our webpage and pshb.org. And the cool thing that I want to show you is in this webpage, we have a detection and management assessment tool that you can use to, you just do an online assessment and you can follow the steps and answer the questions, and it will give you options, management options, depending on your situation, or if it's a new infestation, you have the option to report it to us, and so we can go check it out. All right, so that's it for Shanghai border, and the next one that I wanted to talk is the South American pond weevil, which is this lovely weevil, and as we know, weevils have this big snout that is originally native from Mexico, South and Central America. And it's making its way into the southern part of California. And it was first detected here in San Diego County in 2010. And it's slowly expanding its range, and it's going as far north as Mission Bay in San Diego County. South American palm weevil in general affects Canary Island palms, date palms, and coconut palms, and also can affect sago palms. And the thing is, with this kind of pest, we know that it has the potential to affect many other date palms that we still don't even know that they could affect. This pest is kind of exactly the opposite from the shadow border, in the sense that shadow border were teeny tiny. The South American palm weevil is pretty big. So the larvae are this grub-like things that are about 5 inches long and 1 inch wide. We can also see pupas that live in this cocoon made of palm fibers, like you can see it also in the top picture. And then the adult is pretty big, it's about 1.3 inches long. It has the characteristic snout of the weevils, and it's black and it has these lines on the outer wings. So it's quite conspicuous. If you see it, it will catch your eye. And the way this beetle attacks the palms is the females get attracted to the fresh wounds in the palm, and they go to the top of the palm here and lay their eggs in the base of the fronds. Once the larvae hatch, they start boring into the crown and basically affecting the meristem of the palm, which is the part where the palm starts growing. So what happens is that the larvae of the beetle basically kills the ability of the palm to keep growing. Once they develop in the palm, and when they're ready, they just disperse and just find another palm. And they can fly up to 1 mile per day. So these pests are very good at expanding their range on their own. And in general, the peak populations happens during the dry season, which is in here during the summer, which is also when the temperatures are warmer and nicer for beetles to fly. So how do we know if our palm or any palm that we see might be infested with South American palm weevil? The main thing is we'll start seeing some yellowing foliage. We'll see some damage in the fronds, and that's because the adults they feed on the fronds. We'll see new emerging fronds just dying. If we see their if a frond falls, we'll be able to see these holes and fracs at the base of the fronds. The pupal cases, we can find them around the trunk of the tree. And then the main thing that can catch your eye is the flattened top in the palm. So palms that are infested with South American palm weevil start looking like this, start looking flat at the top, because all this meristematic part is dead. And eventually they die, like this one in the bottom picture. So again, this is a picture of a palm that's infested with South American palm weevil. As you can see, you still have green fronds at the base, but the top ones, the new fronds, are all dying. These beetles can kill or do kill the palms by themselves, but also there's potential for even more dangerous situations. We know that these beetles are vectors of the red ring nematode. This is a nematode that causes a disease in palms, in African oil palms and coconut palms. And when they get infested with this nematode, the reaction of the palm causes this red ring around the trunk, and that's why it's called a red ring nematode. And it's very nasty disease that can actually kill palms pretty quickly. So luckily, we still haven't found any nematodes in the weevils that are collected here in Southern California, but it's something to keep in mind that it's not only the problem of the weevils killing the palms, but they're also potential hosts for even worse disease. And why do we care about South American palm weevils affecting our palms? Well, the main effect that they have would be on our landscape, right? So we live in Southern California here. We have palms as a very characteristic part of our landscape. But also they can affect the industry, either the ornamental palm industry, and it's calculated that they can cause a $70 million damage on their production. And this California date industry, which is pretty big and can cause damage up to $30 million while affecting the production of dates in here. So things that we can do to manage this pest is mostly monitoring. If we have an infested palm, it should be removed immediately. There are pesticides that can be effective, and they're usually mostly used as preventive treatments. However, all these pesticides are hard to apply and are expensive. There's some systemic and contact pesticides, and you can do applications in the crown of the palm or in the soil. So currently, the research is focused on finding better pesticides that can control this pest, and other options like attract and kill traps. Those are the efforts that are happening right now, but also the future plans will be to try to find a natural enemy that we can bring up here. So since right now the main goal is to stop the spread of this pest, what we need to do is to know where are the new infested palms and actually remove them immediately. So a way that you can do to actually learn more about South American palm weevil and actually be proactive about it is you can go to the webpage of the Center for Invasive Species Research. There's a lot more information over there, but also you can follow, if you find a tree, a palm that has the top flattened and the top of the fronds are dying, then you can report it using this tool in here. And lastly, the last pest that I wanted to talk to you about is the gold-spotted oak borer. And this is a pest that is also very prevalent here in Southern California, and as the name shows you, it attacks oaks. So this is a beetle from the jewel beetles group, or the Bursaphelenchus family. And what they do is they bore into oaks and live here right under the bark, between the phloem and the cambium. And these beetles in the United States are actually native to the southern portion of Arizona. And what we can see in this map, this is the native regions in the US, in southern Arizona. This is the newly infested area, or where they invaded in California. And as you can see, the pink is showing areas where there's actually oaks or hosts for this beetle. And in between these two regions, there's no host. And the fact that these beetles made it very recently to Southern California without having any suitable habitat in between gives us the idea that it was definitely brought through probably firewood from Arizona to California. And if we see the distribution in here in Southern California, we can see that it's mostly in San Diego County, but there's also different focuses of infestation in Orange, LA, and Riverside counties. And this infestation focuses are spotted, which also gives us the idea that the main way they found these new spots is because they were moved by people through the movement of firewood. And that's something that is not uncommon, especially here, especially for oak firewood, which is very valuable, and people just buy it for cheap on the side of the road and bring it to their homes, not knowing that it can bring a pest. They can cause serious oak mortality in natural habitats. They prefer 3 species of oaks. The most susceptible here are the coast live oak and the California black oak. They can actually also attack the canyon live oak. And the way we can identify them is especially because of these D-shaped holes that they create on the bark of the oak when they emerge. Other evidence of attack is if we see branch dieback and crown thinning over the, even though a lot of other things like drought can cause those symptoms. So if we see crown thinning and branch dieback, we should just look for those D-shaped holes in the bark. Sometimes we can see staining, and woodpecker feeding is another symptoms because their larvae live exactly under the bark, so the woodpeckers will go and feed on the larvae, and that gives us an idea that there's probably more larvae developing in that tree. In general, the management of these pests includes a combination of monitoring and surveying and figuring out when and where this pest is present. For high-value trees, we can use insecticides to control or even prevent the infestation. Heavily infested trees should be removed and disposed because there's no chance of saving them, and they are basically creating more beetles for dispersed in the area. And then proceeding with restoration efforts for replacing of those lost oaks. The wood that is down of an infested tree can actually be, as I said, a vector of this pest. So it's very important to manage the wood. And the ways we can manage the wood and make sure we're not moving this pest around is either by debarking the wood. These beetles live only in the bark. So if we debark the wood, then the wood is safe to be moved around and used as fuel, for example. Otherwise, we can grind the wood, chip it for less than 3 inches. The wood can be seasoned before being moved, but that doesn't mean that you're getting rid of the beetles. The beetles are going to emerge and infest the surrounding trees. So this is only something that you can do if you want to move the wood around, but it's not really recommended. Or seasoning them by containment. So you can use metal mesh and season the wood under the metal mesh, so you're making sure that the beetles that emerge from this wood will die basically inside the mesh. And then after you leave it there for about 1 or 2 years, you can actually move that wood. And where can you find more information for GSOB? You can go to gsob.org. And if you find an infested tree, you can actually report a tree that you suspect is infested with GSOB in this website. What else can you do? Well, you can learn more about GSOB at gsob.org. You can report suspect trees and report new infestations. And you can be very active at spreading the word about GSOB and other pests and firewood, and be very proactive through the buy it where you burn it. Just don't move firewood around. With that, I would like to show you that basically we have so many agencies that are collaborating, just trying to find solutions and implement management practices for all of these pests. And there's been a lot of coordinated efforts all over Southern California. And there's many more agencies that I couldn't fit in this slide. And so just remember, you can help detect invasive pests and report them. And you can help by not moving pests around, especially not moving firewood and not moving just green waste. So that's it. With that, if there's any questions.
Thank you so much, Bea. If people want to go ahead and type questions into the chat, I'm just going to launch. Whoops. Okay. Doug, did you have something you wanted to add?
Oh, well, I was just going to urge people to type in any questions in the chat. In the meantime, I did want to ask Bea about, that last slide with all of those logos of all of those entities that are paying attention to this problem is wonderful, but I guess I wouldn't want to give the impression that we've got it all under control. And so I wondered if you could say a little bit about some of the challenges that we are facing in responding to new tree pest threats thoroughly and rapidly, given that most of the infrastructure that's been set up is around protecting agriculture. And it seems like many of the new pests are coming in through more urban settings, or getting a start there, and there isn't necessarily a lot of funding readily available to address those problems. Anything you can say about that, and some of the collaborations that maybe have some hopeful signs for pushing through that?
Right, thank you, Doug.
Yeah. I'm just going to interrupt for 1 minute. Sarah, can you launch the poll, because I'm having trouble?
Yes, I can try.
Go ahead.
So yeah, you have a great point there, Doug. It's especially for pests that are affecting the urban forest. The main thing is that these pests are pests to the trees that are not necessarily agricultural production, right? And in general, our response to invasive pests is very much linked with their effects on agriculture. So what happens with this kind of pests? Actually, there's a term that they has been coined as they call them the orphan pests. Like nobody is actually taking care of them. And that's because when they are not a big threat to the agriculture, there is less availability of federal funding for them. And it ends up being up to each more local government to actually devote funds into managing them. And of course, those funds are way less abundant, and again the decision tends to be the same. Oh, if it's not a problem for agriculture, then it's we're not interested, or we don't have the funds to taking care of these pests. And what ends up happening is that we end up underfunded. And so one of the main things that we need to do is to change this conception and basically increase how much we value our urban forest and how much we can consider our urban forest a very valuable resource and that we need to protect. That being said, that makes it a lot, basically, that makes it a lot more difficult to control or having efforts towards having a rapid response or having some kind of quarantine towards these pests. Most of the pests that do have quarantines are, in fact, agricultural pests. And in these cases, what we've been doing is working together with different agencies to actually get out the word that these pests are actually a big threat and they're actually threatening something that is important to us. So, for example, with the invasive shadowborer, we've been having some success in that sense. So recently, with the actually group efforts of all those agencies, we got an assembly bill passed where first of all, the California Invasive Species Advisory Committee has been basically funded, and through this committee, where there's fundings for specifically for dealing with shadowborer and creating an action plan at the state level. And so right now we're really working on having efforts on creating rapid response and early detection plans for this pest that can actually be used for any of the other pests that might arrive in the future.
Hey, Bea, I'm just going to stop in for a minute. I apologize. We mistakenly launched yesterday's poll about aquatic invasive species. So if you answered the poll when it first showed up and there were questions about bilge tanks, please answer this one again. Thank you. Go ahead.
And Bea, let me, there's a couple questions that have been put into the chat, and I also realize our time is running long, so if you need to take off for the end of your lunch hour, feel free. We greatly appreciate your participation. So Bea, somebody asks, has the shot-hole borer been found in the San Bernardino Mountains?
That's a good question.
I don't believe that it has, and the Forest Service has their own monitoring program that happens in the national forests. It's run out of their forest health protection program that actually, while it works statewide, is housed in the San Bernardino National Forest offices. So no, and we have been looking for it there.
And does that answer the other question about have there been monitoring traps placed at potential entrance points to the high desert, like freeway, the 14 north to Lancaster and Antelope Valley and at Cajon Pass?
Not necessarily. Bea, do you know the answer to that question?
I do not know. Yeah.
I believe they have not been. Now, that being said, I should say that there are the California Department of Food and Agriculture, CDFA, has sort of a general pest monitoring program that they do, and the kinds of traps they use could potentially collect shot-hole borer and gold-spotted oak borer. However, they don't use the lure that we found to be most effective with shot-hole borer. And then, as I said before, the Forest Service, at least on the forest side, so that would be Angeles Forest there, has been monitoring. And actually, that said, there may also be, and this is way further west, I think, than you're thinking about, but I think there may be some monitoring traps placed at Placerita Canyon.
That could be. And as far as I know, the Forestry has been monitoring, but right now they only have monitoring traps in San Diego.
Yeah, for shot hole borer. Now the question is really which pest. We have found gold-spotted oak borer in the Green Valley area going towards the Inlet Valley, and there is active monitoring for that pest going on around the known infestation.
Right.
Bea, another question is, can you talk briefly about sudden oak death and also the relationship between pitch canker and insects in Central California?
Right.
Those don't sound like large topics at all, but maybe just the basics of those topics. And why don't you throw in tree mortality in the Sierra while you're at it?
I'm going to help Bea out here. She can add to this if she likes, but we actually, so you see ANR has a great monthly journal that we put out called California Agriculture. And this month's issue of California Agriculture has our latest research on tree mortality in the Sierra Nevada. So there's an article in there about that. The other piece that I would mention about sudden oak death and pitch canker, at least for pitch canker and insects in Central California, if you want to email Beatriz or I, we could check in with Jody Axelson, who's our sort of Northern California person working on invasive tree pests out of UC Berkeley, and or with Matteo Garbaletto, who's a plant pathologist who works on sudden oak death. And you can also go to the sudden oak death mapping site, which I'll look up and post here.
And while you're at it, do you have email addresses that you can post for contacting you with any follow-up questions? Or is that on the website for the invasive lunch webinars?
Is it on the website, or otherwise I can add it?
I don't think it's there, but if you'd like me to post it there, I can do that.
Yeah, for sure.
And I can also post links. You can go to our IPM program, which is linked there as well, and find some information about some of these pests.
Perfect. Yeah, let's make sure if you can just add my contact information there in the website of the lunch talks, then people can reach me there, because I actually forgot to add it here in my slide.
Okay.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
And maybe you could put it in the chat.
Oh yeah. I can do. Can I do that right now?
Well, you're. How about if I do it for you?
If there's anyone who would like to still take the poll, please do. Otherwise, I'm going to close that out and thank everyone for joining us today. And Bea should be able to add it to the chat if we give her a second to think.
Oh, here's the chat.
Yeah. Oh,
I think I just did it.
Oh, okay, perfect. Nice.
Good. Well, we greatly appreciate everyone joining us, and please do circulate notice of the next 3 webinars to your friends, family, colleagues. The goal here is really to reach a broad section of Californians with information about invasive species. So we're thrilled to reach colleagues. We'd be equally thrilled to reach family and friends who don't know much about invasive species yet. And so that's a big part of our contribution to California Invasive Species Action Week, is to try to recruit people who aren't already familiar with these topics to get a little more familiar. So the reminder, we have a talk on nutria tomorrow, and we have a talk on watershed work on Arundo giant reed on Thursday, and on Friday we have a talk from Walnut Creek in Contra Costa County on, from up in Marin County and Sonoma County on work that's being done on invasive knotweed. All of them should be really good talks, both for people in the field and the layperson. So please invite all your friends.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Yes, thank you for joining. Bye-bye.
Bye.